Hello, everybody. It's time for our chill Friday night Q&A hangout. If you would like to grow as an artist and you can't take an art class, we've got everything you need here at Art Prof: critiques, tutorials, professional development, and workshops. Tell me in the chat, how has your week been? We announced the Art Dare for August, and it is going to be about jewelry and wearable sculpture. I don't know anything about jewelry, so I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with it because after visiting Annalise's jewelry studio in Honolulu, I mean, I'm about to just drop everything and go be a jeweler. It looks like so much fun. But remember, for the Art Dare, you don't have to do anything that complicated. You could wrap some paper around your arm, and that could count as a wearable piece. You can do all kinds of things with ordinary supplies. So don't feel for this Art Dare that you need to do anything really involved. So actually, I'd love to hear from people in the chat. How many of you here have created any jewelry or any wearable pieces? I just remember with my kids, they were really into rainbow loom. Does anybody here know what I'm talking about? This is little elastic colored pieces and you weave them together and they become these really cute little stretchy bracelets. So I feel like that's my last encounter with jewelry. But even if you've never made jewelry before, I think it's super fun to get started. I released this video this week where Annalise shows these cards, these samples of jewelry techniques that she made for a lot of her students. And simple things like this, getting wire, just wrapping it, it does not have to be complicated. So I hope to see some of you get excited about the Art Dare because I'm just so proud of you guys. It's just so fun to see what everybody does throughout the week. Welcome, Plushy Brigade, and Reb Blunt knows what I'm talking about, Rainbow Loom. Adrian hasn't thought about it in 10 years. Oh my gosh, we just had cases of these rainbow looms. And of course, we use like 2% of them. It's a little bit ridiculous. But I really loved seeing all of these examples because I think the thing about jewelry is that it's hard to make it accessible. I mean, I'm a great example that if you asked me to make jewelry, I'd be like, oh, okay, hand me the string and beads. That's about as far as it goes. But the thing is, when Annalise laid out the shapes like this, and they were really simple and small, I looked at these boards and I just thought, oh my gosh, if I was a kid and I saw this, this would make me feel like I could really do something. Because all the other tools are just super intimidating. Like this is cloisonné, which is a technique for jewelry from the Middle Ages, very complex with enamel, but you can absolutely start here. Yeah, so Neil says, I've created a bunch of paper headpieces. Oh, paper's fantastic because it's so lightweight. And so you don't encounter some of the issues that you would have with another material. And remember, you guys can pick my brain on Friday evenings. I'm happy to answer questions that you might have related to your art. If you want to just comment and tell us what's happening this week with you, if there's any projects you're working on, any particular new art supplies that you've got, because guess what? I've got some toys here. My toy is this. It's very exciting. So this is that microphone that I was asking people for help with, and I finally took it out of the box. I feel like this is like an engagement ring. I'm like opening this so I can propose to somebody, but look at this. It's so pretty. Look at that. They're so nice because I was all like wired up before. I don't need wires for this. You just clip it on and everything's done through Bluetooth. And I'm just thrilled because in an echoey museum, it's a giant pain to get good sound. But look at this. So it comes out and it's just this little clip. So you just do this and it just like clips onto your shirt like this. Isn't that cool? That's I'm in Star Trek. It's just this one thing. And then it uses an app on my phone. And as you can see here, there's two of them. So that's the main thing I was concerned about. Is I only had one mic before that I would just plug in, and it was a piece of crap. And so here I can mic in two people into my phone. Oh, I'm so excited. Because guess what, everybody? Next week, I'm going to Boston. And I'm really excited because I have two very cool appointments at two major museums in Boston. Not going to say more than that because some of it's a little hush-hush. And I'm very, very excited. So I have two appointments with two very cool people at these museums that I'm excited to shoot for all of you. It's going to be really cool. We're going to be able to talk about and show a lot of things that we've never shown on this channel before, which is saying a lot because we have a lot of content on our channel. And people say to me, oh, you've covered everything. I'm like, no, there's a lot of things we haven't covered, but this one has been a big gaping hole in our programming. So I'm not going to answer, but who here would like to take a stab at what that content is, the big gaping hole in our programming? What is it? Tell me in the chat. And Manette says, Sis started making jewelry. She's never entered an art dare, but I was excited to tell her about this one. Oh, isn't that so fun when you can rope in your friends and family to participate? I just love it. And Deb Lee tried some steampunk necklaces with different metal pieces, but the glue didn't work for long. Oh, adhesives for anything three-dimensional. You would not believe how difficult it is to find the right adhesive for any given material. So I did a exhibition at a gallery once for John Udvardy. He was a longtime foundation study professor at RISD, and he did all found objects. So he would just collect all these objects, a gigantic warehouse of all of these objects. And he said the most difficult part of his practice was figuring out how to get two things to stick together, because he had pieces of cast iron and rocks and pebbles and pieces of wood. And I was just really blown away by that. Adrian made chainmail. Alexandria made rolled paper beads. Oh, I've never done that before. That sounds amazing. Plus, she's asking, I need a skeleton like the one you have behind you. Does anyone know where I can find a relatively inexpensive, anatomically correct one? I can tell you if you want it anatomically correct, you're not going to get it for less than $200 or $300. I can't remember how much Logan cost. I think it was $250 or $300. But yeah, that's an issue because the ones that are cheaper are not very anatomically correct, but they're really handy. And I think when I get back from my Boston trip, I do want to revamp the anatomy series. I know I've been talking about that for a little while, but it's been a little crazy between my Hawaii trip and also what I'm doing next week. And okay, so Tolly says, curating art pieces. Well, in case you missed it, I did interview a curator of manuscripts, Larissa Grolemond, at the Getty. I only released 2 shorts. I still have to do the rest, but there's probably at least 4 more shorts coming out with Larissa, and she talks a lot about curation and what's the preparation behind it. I mean, we have so little on that content, but it's not a gaping hole. We have something, and we have more to come in that area. So we have some other guesses. Neil is guessing art conservation. And we also have, oh, okay, that's the other guess. I'm going to stay mum on that one. But you are correct, Neil. We do not have any content on art conservation. I'm not going to confirm whether or not that is the thing I'm doing next week. But I can tell you I am over the moon that I booked these appointments. And I wonder actually if it has something to do with that I have the goods now. to show museums because I can say, hey, I interviewed this curator of the Getty and I don't feel like such an idiot. Edie's asking, when you say appointment, do you mean to see someone or you've been given a position there? Oh, no position at all. Trust me, I'm staying here. When I say appointment, I'm going to meet some people and no more about that. Staying mum about the rest. And we also have Nancy celebrating my 54th birthday. Went to a decorative art museum we found that had amazing rugs created by an artist named Emily Robertson. At some point, when the timing's right, I really want to go to the textiles room that is at the Metropolitan Museum. I didn't realize that was a thing. So if you don't know this already, most major museums will have a print room. And what people don't know about the print room is that anybody can make an appointment. It's just most people don't know about it unless you're a scholar or you're somebody like me who worked in academia. But even smaller scale museums have print collections you can make appointments for. I used to take my classes at RISD over to the print collection at the RISD Museum. So they have a print room as well at the Metropolitan in New York, which I've been to. I went probably in about 2003, so it was a ways back. I definitely want to go again. But they have a textiles room where they will take out textiles to show you. I'd have to check into logistics, who they allow and stuff like that. But the fact that they have that made me really, really excited. So it's just a matter of making the right connections and people who are excited about what you're doing, because what I've been trying to pitch to the museums is that we do work very hard to make our content digestible, that our content becomes an entry point for something else. I've always hoped that that's something we could be to make things just a little bit less intimidating to approach, because I'll tell you, if I watch some of those museum videos, they're really academic. And if I was somebody who didn't have an academic background, I feel like that would be intimidating for me. We also have Tali. How do you feel about art schools closing this year? Do you feel this is a sign of the teaching profession in the arts or something else? I haven't gone to art school, took art classes in university. I don't know if you're referring to a specific school, Tali, but I can tell everybody, in case you missed it, that University of the Arts in Philadelphia abruptly closed. And it was a mess because the faculty and the students, the way they found out was in the media. Like, the school didn't even make an official announcement or prepare the students. And I feel so bad for the students who were meant to enroll this coming September, because admissions is over. And thank goodness there were a bunch of art schools who reopened the admissions cycle. So some of these University of the Arts students had options to go somewhere else. But I mean, I would have been just absolutely heartbroken by how abrupt that was. I mean, faculty didn't even know. And it's hard to say because every school is so different in terms of how they operate, their endowment, and just the basic structure of the school. So I don't see it as much a reflection of the art world as much as I see it as a seismic shift in academia, which I think is an absolute crisis right now. Because I've chatted with Kat a little bit here and there, and some of you may know she's teaching in the illustration department at RISD, and a lot of the things that she is having to do, I was like, oh my God, we never did that. Like, that just wasn't even on the landscape before. I mean, I started teaching at RISD in 2007. It's like the whole academic landscape. COVID was a huge part of it, but I also think people are really starting to question whether they really need that degree to do what it is that they want to do. I mean, sure, if you want to be a lawyer, obviously you have to go to school, but I think the options for learning now are just 10,000 times greater than they were before the pandemic, because all of a sudden all these people started putting things online. So I see it as a crisis of academia. I mean, there's all kinds of stories about schools going through difficult situations. So I don't know enough about enough of them to be able to speak to that. But it is really heartbreaking, I think, when that happens to that art community. Okay, so Courtney is guessing that the gap in our content is fiber arts. And you are correct. We do not have any content about fiber arts. And as Neil said earlier, we do not have anything on conservation. So I was very happy when we hired Dorian because he basically came and covered like 8 different fields for us that we didn't have because he's so prolific. I mean, he does furniture design, graphic design, fashion design, so many different fields that we never ever had before. So I was like, wow, we just filled in all these holes with one hire, but there are many other holes that we would like to fill. And remember, if there is content that you guys want to see us do, tell us. Tell us in the Discord. You can also comment on Instagram, because I'll tell you, I really look to all of you for help in terms of determining what it is that would really help you, because I try to guess what people are interested in, but honestly, some of our best videos are because somebody suggested something that I just didn't even occur to me. I mean, the draw alongs that I've done where I draw in real time, you guys sort of invented that because I was just streaming thinking, oh, I'm just drawing. But then people started drawing with me and I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Let's actually turn it into a draw along. And so I hold all of you responsible for a lot of the formats and the content that we produce. And so I am always all ears when it comes to suggestions for content. And Lisa says, I've heard lately accommodating students has increased massively, which sounds good, can be pretty aggravating for the other students. Definitely the things that students are needing now is very different than students that I was teaching in 2007. Like smartphones really weren't a thing. And it wasn't until, I guess, a couple years before I left, the smartphone culture really came to be. And what ended up happening is students didn't talk to each other during break. They went off and they'd watch a YouTube video. And we just stared at each other awkwardly during breaks in the 90s. But I think to a certain degree, you need that time with people, regardless of how awkward it can get when you're hanging out with some people, because you do form just really extraordinary bonds with people when you've had to spend time like that with them. Brandon says, do you have advice for running an art business? I'm currently trying to learn about things like money management, time management, and doing taxes as a freelance artist. It's all a bit underwhelming. In general, running a business, yes, it is. Totally different set of skills. And there's a lot of stuff like taxes, which I hate doing so much. But honestly, I don't think it helps to study those things separately without knowing something about your business. Because actually, a big part of your business is doing research. Who's your audience? Who are the people you're trying to reach? And actually, tell me in the chat, who here has sold work, and maybe what context, online, at an art fair, and whether you felt that you had to learn who your audience was. I always felt that way. Deepti figured out that art teachers really liked her pins. It's so specific. But what I'm trying to say is, in terms of putting the work out there and building an audience, it's research. And so actually, for a lot of people, when they get started with a business, it's happening before they've actually done anything financial. And so that's one thing I would recommend for people to do, especially if you're younger. Don't start a business right away. just spend a little time doing some research on your work, putting it out there, just seeing, and then incrementally build up the business. It's not the same thing as a shop where, you know, you get a retail store and you do all these things. But what I'm trying to say is that it's good to learn all those things, but you may find that a lot of it's not relevant in terms of being a student, because let's say you do freelance for art directors and you want to do work for publications like magazines and the New York Times or something like that. That's a very different relationship than if you have an online store and you're selling your work. For example, if I get hired by the New York Times to do an illustration, I generally do not have to worry about, are they going to pay me? Whereas if you're doing a commission, oh yes, you have to make sure you get paid. So what I'm trying to say is that to find out what actually is relevant, what's worth spending your time on, you have to learn a little bit about what kind of business you want, because businesses are so different. I mean, the way I look at Art Prof, I mean, yes, we give away all of our video content, but the structure that we use today, the Patreon group, the Discord, all of these various programs, I did not anticipate any of that. It just built organically and we responded as things went. Tolly's asking about where can we mention what content. Tolly's talking about suggesting things. You can just put it in the general chat. I always remind people that we ask people not to ping specific staff, because if you did, I would just get pinged all day. But I can tell you, I do look at all the channels. So if you just put something in there, don't tag me, but just write Prof Lieu, I'll probably find it. It's just the pinging gets a little out of control otherwise. Kara Sue says, start my first 4-credit college level art class in a couple of weeks. Well, that's really exciting. What advice do you have and how can I get the most out of it? It's a life and object drawing class. Oh, that sounds like so much fun, Kara Sue. I'm so excited for you. I think what's very important as a student is to ask questions and not be afraid to ask questions. I know it's intimidating for some people, but you guys should see when I'm a student, it's kind of hilarious because I have no qualms about just asking super dumb questions. I just constantly do it. And it might seem a little ridiculous, but I'm sure I'm asking questions that a lot of people are wanting to ask, but maybe are feeling a little shy or something like that. So ask those questions and do not be afraid to ask for help. Because a lot of times when I was teaching in the classroom, I had no idea who was struggling. I mean, I would try to guess, but a lot of students would really hide that they were struggling. And so a lot of the time I just had no idea. And so if a student came to me and they said, hey, I'm really struggling, or I don't understand this, number one, I was always happy to help them. And number two, they always felt that after that conversation, they always felt better. Even if they were still struggling with things, the fact that I knew that they were struggling, that I could see that, was extremely helpful. So never be afraid to tell your instructor that you're having a hard time or you don't understand something, because I know students are thinking those things, but unless you have a couple of people like me who can just shamelessly ask all kinds of questions, and I ask questions that I'm like, gosh, people must think I'm so dumb, but it's like I'm genuinely wondering things like this. So don't be afraid to do that. Courtney's asking, what is the 3-to-1 critique mean? Yes, that is a guideline that is part of our Discord server. So to make things a little bit more clear for everybody. So we have the public part of the Discord. Anybody can join. It's free. And we do have public critique channels. So that's where you can go into the critique channel. You can post a painting and say, I made this acrylic painting. I'm struggling with the color. Can you guys help me figure out what to do? And so because it's extremely important to us that the community is mutually supportive of each other, we say to everybody, for every one artwork you post for critique, you have to post 3 substantial comments on other people's artwork, because otherwise it becomes one of those groups where people just post and maybe someone says cool, And then that's it. And it just becomes this board of just random images. Tell me in the chat, how many people here have been in some other online group and have seen that? Because in our Discord, because we have this guideline, you will get substantial comments from several people because we have this guideline. If we didn't have it, nobody would do that, because I mean, who would, unless we have a particular, I mean, some people maybe, but it's just not common. So that's something that we ask for people to do, because it makes the critique channels so much better of an experience for everybody. And I know a lot of people will say to me after they spent some time in the Discord, they'll say, you know something, I never thought that critiquing someone else's artwork would actually help me. But I know a lot of people have told me that they've learned a lot just looking at other people's work, trying to break it down and trying to analyze it. So if you've been in the critique channels in our Discord and you've learned something from that experience, tell us in the chat, because I truly think critique is something that people have to learn about. It's not something you know how to do. It's a skill, totally separate skill than, say, how to paint with acrylics. And it was a big part of how I educated students in academia. And so I wanted to recreate something like that. So when you post your work, it's not just about you and getting feedback. It's about you looking at other people's work and learning from the experience of looking at theirs and trying to break down what you think could be improved. Priscilla is asking, how do you keep your passion alive for art? By the way, I love your excitement. It's very funny because we have a couple of museum videos where it's me or Jordan, and we're kind of excited about any particular thing. And we get so many comments. People are like, you guys are so dumb. You sound like Valley Girls at a museum. And I was like, come on, tell me you don't behave like that too when you go to a museum. I mean, we're not all art historians and we're going to sit down and break it down. I'm like, no, that's not what I do. I go to a museum and I'm like, what is that? That's literally my reaction in so many circumstances where I try to figure it out. And then people in the comments are like, how can you not know what that is? I'm like, come on, like, who do you think I am? Because I do think it is very important that we show people that not everybody's an art historian, and that it's fine to just be a person and go to a museum and not feel like you have to know things already, that you can construct your own interpretation of how you react to that piece. How do you keep your passion alive? I can't not do it. I'm a little bit more compulsive, I think, than people think. I think it comes across as passion, but a lot of it is I can't not do it. Because I was talking to my spouse today, and I was complaining that I had some family members who would say to me, you work too hard. And I was like, I don't think you guys understand how this works for me. Like, I cannot not work hard. Once I've relaxed longer than 30 minutes, I'm like, done. I have to like get up and do something. So I just am one of those people. I would just curl up and die if I sat around for a little bit. Also, oh, I love this. Plushie Brigade says, I like painting people stuffed animals, so I worked my way into the plushie community. I found success with commissions. Absolutely. You're not going to market paintings of stuffed animals to people who like steampunk artwork. It just doesn't work that way. So that's a big part of that. And Uma says, have you ever thought of running your own art gallery? Never. And here's why. I was a gallery director for the gallery in the art department at Wellesley College. I did that for 4 years. And so I worked with other professors and artists to create programming. So we'd make a schedule of all the shows and everything. And I did everything. I mean, I helped organize all of the student workers who would help install the shows. I would work with the artists and get all the, it's a huge amount of work. And I have so much respect for people who can do that, because it's so many things that really are sort of invisible when they're done well. For example, most of us, when we go to a museum, we expect paintings are hung correctly and they're not crooked and things like that. The pedestals don't have scratches on them. And so when we go in and everything looks great, we just like accept that. And so when you see, if you go into a museum and a painting is like crooked, it's like, what? It's like sacrilegious. And so that's part of the hardware I just don't want to deal with. But also, it's very much an administrative position and about communications. And that's not really my cup of tea full time. Certainly, I do a lot of that here. But the emphasis for me here is the education. That's what interests me and the making of the work. I'm not as into all of the networking and talking to artists and in that way, in a gallery context. I'm not talking about like here where I'm talking to all of you. And I like this from Quinton, not me. I just keep on trying to at least draw or design something for my portfolio. Nothing too serious, but kept original. I mean, honestly, I just think we can afford to laugh at ourselves a little bit more as artists, at least in academia and in the fine art world. Some days I just like, oh my God, people, why do you have to take yourself so seriously? Could we just like chill for a minute? And I have never regretted walking away from the snottiness, people turning their nose up at each other. I'm just so done with that. And I don't care if anybody says I sound like a Valley girl. I'm like, that's how I want to talk about things. I don't want to sound like I'm doing a presentation to a conference of 8 people who will read my journal for 5 minutes. That doesn't interest me at all. If you guys can find me a crew of paid, fabulous professionals and do that, I might think about it for, I don't know, a couple hours a week, but it's so much work to do those things in person. And it's so expensive. Like, I just don't have the revenue to be able to do something like that. We're still just scraping by. I know it's dumb. I'm not an amazing business person. We're still on a shoestring budget and stuff like that. And perhaps we can chalk that up to my not so incredible business skills, but I don't know that I want to become some big corporate thing. I feel like that for me is a big turnoff. On the other hand, I would like to have a bigger staff to do a lot of things. TM says, all else being equal, does medium affect the price of a painting like acrylic versus oil? I enjoy acrylics, but I'm wondering if I should paint in oils if they fetch a higher price. It depends on your audience. For example, if you are doing stuff and you're high profile enough that your work is going into museums and things like that, really top of the food chain type of things, I do think oil is valued a little bit more, but it depends. I mean, I don't think just because you're an acrylic painter, you're going to be priced lower. I mean, there's so many people who are so high up on the food chain, doesn't matter what they painted. Like, they can paint in anything and people will buy it because they're so well known. I think what would be a better solution is to paint with whatever suits you the best. Because I have all my painting training was in oils. But for me right now, because I don't have a real studio space, I mean, this is just my office and my kids barge in here all the time. It's really not very professional. But for that reason, I really don't want to work with oils because I just don't have the space that's appropriate. And so for me, doing oils is a big enough hassle that I don't do it. And so the whole thing about like, oh, is this going to be priced higher or that like that? There's just so many other factors involved that the choice of the medium is just one tiny piece of that package. And you also have to think about the materials, how much it costs. Oil paints are far more expensive than acrylics. And also you have to think about the surfaces. For oil, you have to have really sturdy archival things. Acrylic, you don't have to worry about that. So I would just ask yourself what you want to paint with and not worry about pricing, because that's a whole other ballgame. Also, Welcome, Lynn. I would love to hear lurkers say hello in the chat. I love it when you guys come on. Brandon says, could you explain what deliberate drawing means? I'm not quite sure. I often wonder if I'm drawing with purpose or not. Is that a specific term, deliberate drawing, Brandon? If yes, I've never heard of that before. And you're saying, I wonder if I'm drawing with purpose. It's hard to say because drawing with purpose is so open to interpretation. People can think about that in a billion different ways. I think for me, what I think about more is confidence. Because you know something, there's so many, let's just say, drawings in the world. Millions and millions of drawings. And when I look at drawings, I'll tell you what I look for is, and you can't define it, it's just a feel. You look at a drawing and you feel the confidence of the artist. For example, if you look up Rembrandt's ink drawings, they're so loose, so experimental, and you can feel him just putting the mark down, not second guessing it, not fussing, and really being bold about that. So that's just one example, but I would say you may need to find a way to turn that off a little bit, because I know for some of us, we are our own worst enemy. Who here has a situation artistically where you have felt that you were your own worst enemy? And so sometimes if you're just bothering yourself about what you should be doing, or I'm not doing this, or I should be doing this, I know for me, I would find that such a distraction. I wouldn't be able to draw. So my recommendation, this is what I do, is I have to have some degree of distraction. So for example, I know some people listen to music. I always watch movies because I like sort of pay attention, but it's a movie I've watched 8,000 times, but it keeps my mind off of the fussing, because the fussing can be a bad thing. We have Lisa, who says, I have 2 museum memberships. Most members and visitors are really nice and friendly. Who are these snobby people? I've rarely met them at my local museums. Oh, okay. Just to be clear, I was talking about the whole like gallery scene and people in academia. I'm not talking about the general public. That's a completely different can of worms. It's like basically my colleagues in academia and people in the gallery world. Snob stay home typing comments. Okay, so Raphael says, have you ever tried to do colored pencils on top of acrylics? Any tips on that? Yep. The last piece I did, which was the Sweeney Todd Theater, was colored pencils on top of acrylics. Now, it depends on the thickness of your acrylics, though. I paint very thin. I do not build up paint at all. So for me, I am able to put colored pencils on top. But if you paint thick, I don't think that would work very well. So as long as you've got a sort of thin amount, that should be helpful. But I love putting colored pencils on other things. I've put colored pencils on top of watercolors. I've done it on top of acrylic inks, acrylic paints. I think they're really excellent for doing like little touches. And actually, I did that in my cactus drawing. And actually, give me a second. I'll come back. It's right over here. I know exactly where it is. Here it is. Okay. Let's take a look at that. So this painting, so this is something I did in Hawaii. I painted this on site. And so you can see this is all watercolor. Most of it's watercolor. But if you guys look up close, all of those little spikes that are on the cactus, that is all colored pencil. So all the little spikes down here to the bottom, none of that is watercolor. And I could have done it with paint. I think something like this is a giant pain with watercolor. I mean, I don't know, maybe there are people out there who paint around the little spikes, but I just didn't want to do it. So I was like, okay, colored pencil. I'm just going to do this quickly. I know there are some watercolor purists who would argue that I'm not a painter and all that stuff, but I don't care. Edie's asking, didn't the pop artists use acrylics? I'm sure some of them did. I don't have specifics on who did what, but acrylic, in the scheme of things, it's a very new paint material. I mean, oil paint has been around for centuries. And so I think some of it is just that oil painting has this grand tradition that goes throughout history. And so it has sort of a gravitas that I think sometimes acrylic doesn't have. Tolly says, is it possible to have a side business revolving around books? If you can follow up, Tolly, what do you mean by books? If you're talking about illustrating a book or writing a book or both, because the thing I can tell you is that any industry like that, like if you want to publish with a publisher, that is a full-time thing. Like that is probably for most people not a side gig. I mean, maybe if you are a celebrity and you decide you want to make a children's book, you could probably get away with it, but I think your average person is not able to do that. JR says, any tips for portraits and head drawings? The Loomis method feels too convoluted to be natural. Use your eye. Observe. Because I think the Loomis method, I know for some people really like it. I know Jordan really likes the Loomis method. So if it works for you, great. Doesn't work for me. I'm really bad at all the pieces and like my brain doesn't work that way. And I think the more important thing is to study the skull, know where the bony landmarks are, the zygomatic arch, the nasal bone, seeing where the jawbone is, the chin. If you rely on anatomy, that is never going to fail you. Whereas I think sometimes a lot of the charts that I see, they're pointing out things that don't exist in the anatomy. It's like when people have a picture of an arm and they just draw like a line through the middle. And to me, that's anatomically not accurate because the bones on the arm do not function that way. They have things like the wrist, you have the elbow, things are not so even. Like oftentimes bones are sort of like tilted or going that way. So skull, use our anatomy series. We're going to have an updated one pretty soon. But your eye, that is what really matters the most. Neil says, drawing with purpose, having fun is a purpose, right? Not everything needs to be deep. Nope. Can be whatever you want it to be. Although people do talk about the creative process being fun. It's not fun for me. And I don't mean that as a negative thing. It's just, it doesn't remind me of fun. Like to me, fun is like going to see Hugh Jackman and Boy from Oz on Broadway, which I did. I think it was like 2002. Oh God, that was like one of the greatest moments of my life. That was fun. You know what else was fun? Going to see Deadpool and Wolverine. That was fun. By the way, who saw that movie? Because, yeah. Oh my God. Yes. And yes, I do want to see Hugh Jackman play Wolverine until he's 90, as they talk about in the film. And Neil follows up, I'm my own worst enemy in life in general, not just in art. Oh, I think we all have some part or many parts of our lives where we feel like we're responsible. And you know something? Sometimes we are, but there's a lot of circumstances where we're not. Sometimes you're just in a bad situation. You don't have any control over it. And there are many circumstances where we feel responsible when we really are not. So that's where I found it very helpful to talk to people about the scenario. I mean, isn't there that, what is the acronym? Am I the A-hole? It's on Reddit. I feel like I see it all the time where people are like, am I the jerk? And then everybody chimes in and is like, yes, you are the jerk. So it really depends on the person. Okay, so Raphael's following up. I heard the term deliberate as the opposite of random, but more as this marking is my intention to add this, and I chose for a reason. Okay. I guess the thing about the opposite of random for me in the context of the work that I do, it's more about planning. And I don't necessarily think planning is deliberate necessarily, because sometimes I just want to be packed. I'm going to Boston tomorrow. I need to be packed. Like, I guess you could say it's intentional, but it's like, no, it's just something I have to do. I just have to be planned for something like that. But I think that it is helpful to plan. And some people I know will just sort of meander when they're making work, which is fine. Song Kang told me that's the case for her. For me, I'm not like that. I'm a big planner. So it really depends on the person. Slate says, my own worst enemy. Yes, I'm slow and tend to just stare at the canvas when I'm stuck, which is all the time. Hey, did anybody see that article in the New York Times? I wish I'd clicked on it. I just didn't have the time, but it was something like, can you spend 10 minutes with this painting? And I think it was some interactive thing to test your attention with artwork. And I was like, dude, the only artwork I do that with is mine, because I'm just like obsessing over something. Jay Talk says academic snobbiness is a different animal. Oh, it's a totally different world. I mean, for real, when I am here and I'm talking with all of you, I feel like I went through some portal, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's a planet of nice people. Like, they do exist. Also, Quinton says, maybe I'll possibly explore different art galleries located in the area, just not too far. You know something, for those of you who want to get started doing something like that, selling your work, exhibiting, whatever like that, it is really nice to do something local, because certainly people do things all over the place, especially with the internet now, that is a lot more doable. But it's really nice when it's a local connection. You can just go to the gallery, just go talk to the people. It's really nice. I would just say, don't go and be like, give me a show, like, just go by a couple times, go to some openings. That's always a nice thing that you can do with in-person interactions. Neil says, is it considered professional to have white margins when working on paper? What if I don't have margins? What about framing? If I do need them, how thick should they be? Oh, I rarely have margins. So if it is unprofessional, I guess that's what I've been doing. You can do that. It's not a problem to do that. Now, in terms of framing, it depends on if you have a mat or if you're just putting it under glass. I framed a piece a little ways back, and they actually mounted the painting for me because I'm dumb and I didn't stretch the paper. And so they mounted it for me on foam board. And so in that case, it didn't matter because they just mounted right to the edge. If you are matting something, what they usually do is they'll cut the mat like 2 millimeters so it goes over the edge, because you need that to have it hold in place anyway. But I wouldn't worry about the framing right now. Framing is so expensive. So unless you really are like doing an exhibition that is going to be seen in a public gallery, it's not really that important. Thank you, Slate. Confirms that Warhol used acrylic. Raphael's following up. My biggest trouble is brush control for details in any paint brush media. I have a brush that I really like for details. Of course, it's not here, but it's called an angler brush. And a lot of the times I think people think, oh, I don't have one that demonstrates. Maybe I have one here. What is this? Oh, no, that's a good brush. This is a brush that died on my desk. Typically, I think people like the brushes that are just like a little like tip, but I actually found the angle of the brush very helpful because it just felt a little more sturdy. I think sometimes what happens is people get ones that are so thin, they're a little floppy, and I find those very difficult to use. So you might try that. Adrian is asking, have you ever tried casein paints? I found a book about water media where the artists said their favorites were casein. I have not. Maybe it needs to go on my wish list. But you know something? James Gurney, who I think is a brilliant painter, he uses casein quite a bit. I haven't done a deep dive on any of his videos, but I do think it's milk-based. I could be wrong. Maybe somebody can jump in and correct me. And Tali is following up. Being a self-published creator with making comics, art books, and other illustrated books as a side art business. You can. I mean, if you're self-publishing, I think that is a lot more manageable to do. But I can tell you, even making one of those is a lot of work if you want to do it well. Because if you make a book, I mean, I published a catalog a little ways back of some of my work, and oh my gosh, the layout was so much work. I mean, I was lucky I had somebody who knew about layout and how to do all those things. I mean, if I didn't have that friend, I totally would have hired a graphic designer. So that's the one thing I would keep in mind is if you are going to self-publish a book, you really have to know someone or be willing to learn the skills that you would need to lay out the book, because that's very difficult to do. Like there are all these things I didn't know about in terms of the formatting that I totally would have not done if my friend wasn't helping me. And Nolly says, anyone know what I should get for Japanese ink painting? I only have a few wolf hair brushes. They're too rough and not precise enough for me. I would go to Hiromi Paper. So I'm going to put this into the chat. And they are in Culver City, California. And we have a playlist on all these videos I did at Hiromi Paper, and they have beautiful brushes. They're so nice. They have it for everything. The other place you might try is Yasutomo. Also, I mean, their whole catalog is all of the brush inks and things like that. They are more a brand you would see at an art store. Maybe you can order directly from them. But anyway, look at those two shops. They're all very good for those kinds of supplies. Brandon says, how do you deal with overthinking? Find myself wondering if I'm practicing the right technique or watching the best tutorials. Just worried I'm wasting my time. Don't tell yourself that. There is no part of your life that is a waste of time. I know it feels like it's a waste of time, but did anybody here read Calvin and Hobbes, where every time Calvin complained about something, his father would say, it builds character? I really think that's true. I really think experiences that may come across as bad, sometimes they help us. I mean, when I was a student, I'd get irritated. Oh, this is such a waste of time. Or, oh, I don't like this teacher. But there's no one in life who's not going to encounter some of that stuff. And a lot of life, I believe, is learning how to just deal with the things, because there's some things you just can't get out of it. Like if you have to take a crappy class in college for a requirement, you can't really leave that class unless you don't care about getting the degree. So in that situation, it's more like, okay, well, how do I do this? For me, I watch movies. I mean, find something like that distracts you. Vera says, sometimes just staring at the canvas is the most productive thing you can do. Well, being an artist, it's all about looking. It's all about training your eye. And I definitely have pieces where the more I looked, the more I understood about what I was doing. And so I just don't buy that if your hand is not moving, it's a waste of time or you didn't do anything. Because I think we just need more time, honestly, where we just sit there and just do this. Just sit. I mean, so many of us, myself included, you just pick up your phone and you start doing something else. But I've been trying to do this, especially around my kids. If we're waiting in a doctor's office, or I just sit there, because do I really need to check my YouTube comments? I mean, there's an impulse in me that wants to do that, but I try to find times in my day when I'm like, yep, just going to sit here. I'm just going to do that. I think we could all use some of that. Hello, Butter. Welcome. Dagger brush. Ooh, that sounds like fun. Oh, yes, this is another thing. Plushy says you can always do a floating mat. Yeah, where they put like a little spacer. I don't know what it's called, but The best thing, if you guys want to get something framed and you do have the budget to pay for it from a custom framer, is just talk to the framer, because they'll make all these suggestions that you don't even know about. Like when they mounted it to foam board for me, I didn't even know that was an option until he like came out and showed it to me. So that's important, like to hear from your framer, okay, what are the options? Edie's asking, why are frames so expensive? Materials, not cheap, and a lot of expertise to be able to cut frames. I mean, that's a profession where if you're off like half a millimeter, people will notice. So it's just expensive supplies, and a lot of expertise and training is involved. Also, well, here's a conversation about framing. So Plushy says, get a frame from Goodwill. All you need is glass. We have a follow-up from Brittany, says, I would not buy my frame from Goodwill since they may not be clean and or usable at all. I mean, that is true. I mean, sometimes you'll get a frame from a secondhand store and it's not clean and it's not usable, but I've seen plenty that are just fine. Just put some Windex to it and you're good. I know Mia does that all the time. She framed a whole bunch of pieces and they look so cute because they're not that really generic black frame. Like she actually will pick the frame first and then make a painting that relates to the shapes or the colors in the frame, which I think is such a cool way to go about making a painting. JR is asking how to exaggerate reference. I gather, combine, and use reference, but I feel I don't push it enough to be interesting. One thing you could try, just play with scale and see how that goes. So if you're looking at a person, okay, draw the ear bigger than you think it should be. And that's where I think it's very specific. Like if you say, okay, we have this person's face, let's make it longer than it actually is. Because what I find oftentimes is when people want to exaggerate things, they just do little increments. It's just like a couple baby steps. And so you could say, all right, I don't have anything here. That's figurative. Oh, wait, hang on a second. I think I do. Hang on. Okay, we're going to look at a gnome. So if you guys see this, okay, here's a gnome, right? My gnome collection is very small. And you say, oh, okay, he's got a hat. So a way to exaggerate this is you go, yeah, but you know what? That's a hat. And so you go from a hat that's really small to one that's sort of absurdly tall. And you know something, sometimes the thing that you think is way over the top and just ridiculous, sometimes it looks fantastic. So give that a shot. Or maybe the nose, make the nose like that big. You know, like if we made the nose like that tall, that would really change it a lot. So play around with scale. Yes, Hiromi Paper has an excellent website. Call them. They're extremely knowledgeable and they're super nice. So just call them and they're really good about making recommendations. Again, it's like they know about stuff you probably don't know about. Brittany says, what tutorial books would you recommend instead of videos that I don't learn best from to help me improve my art? It depends on what you're looking to study. What I would do is if you go to artprof.org and you look up, just type into the search bar, educational books. We have a huge list. The other thing that you can also do is if you come into our Discord and you can just ask people like, oh, I want to get better at oil painting. What is a good book? There's a lot of people in our Discord who are very knowledgeable in that. Excellent. See, Kentrell, we learn from positive and negative experiences. Yeah, for example, here's a good lesson. So one of my siblings said that the first time she made pasta, she didn't know you had to boil the water first. So she just put the pasta in the cold water and together and boiled it, and it was just like mush. Like that was a lesson that she learned really well. So this is a good suggestion from Quinton. Yes, I could relate, but lately by reading positive affirmations or doing mental self-care, they'll be able to be relaxed even through difficult situations. Or, you know, watch a Benedict Cumberbatch movie. Like just find the things that just always help you to whatever degree. Mine is Hugh Jackman and Benedict Cumberbatch, but you know what? Okay, Ben and Jerry's Chubby Hubby, that's my favorite ice cream. Tell us, okay, now we need to know in the chat, what's everybody's favorite ice cream flavor? So Chubby Hubby has chocolate covered pretzels, and it has peanut butter and chocolate swirls. And anytime I eat that ice cream, I am so happy. At least just for like 5 minutes, okay? Like maybe I'll go back to the despair afterwards. But if you just make a list of these are the things that are guaranteed to always lift me up, even if it's just the tiniest amount, I think can be very helpful. Inali says, is UV protection glass easy to obtain or no? You can get that from the framer. They have so many different types of glass that you can choose from. And Slate follows up, frame it first. If you pick a frame first, you can make work to fit the frame. Then if you get in a last minute show, you're always ready with a frame. Yeah, that's a brilliant way to think about it. On the other hand, though, I can also tell you guys, let me find this because I think this is the best example that I can give you in terms of a frame. So I did a lot of that Moulin Rouge work that I think some of you guys saw. And I did this painting of Yvette Gonzalez Nasser. And let me show you guys the images for the framing process. Here we go. Just have to pull it up onto here. Okay, so if you guys look at this, does everybody see how, oh, move that back. Okay, so this is a corner. And so this part was this really tacky Michael's like fake jewel stuff. So that was in the painting. And I couldn't believe I found this frame. Like, doesn't that frame isn't that just perfect? It was like made for my painting. And so if you look at it, I was so lucky that I found something like that. Now, naturally, you can't always count on that, but you guys would be amazed. There's some pretty cool frames out there, and most of us don't really have confidence in that until we've actually been to a frame shop. Because I had a fantastic framer when I was in Boston, and he was so nice. He helped me so much, and I did so many things that I never would have done on my own. Let's take a look. Brittany is asking about, let me just fix my slideshow. Brittany's asking about, do I have to pay for access to your Patreon group to get access to your Discord group? Okay, so for people who don't know, the Patreon group is $20 a month, and that gets you weekly voice sessions with me and the staff. I do critiques, written critiques in the Patreon group. I don't do them in the public channels. And it's a small group of artists, so it's a lot easier to get to know everybody. Our Discord has like over 12,000 members, and so it's harder to get to know people in the Patreon group. It's very easy. Also, we don't have that critique rule. So if you join the Patreon group, you can just post, and you don't have to critique anybody else's stuff. I mean, it's nice when people do, but it's absolutely not totally required. But the Discord itself, which is all kinds of channels. You can ask technique questions. You can share your work. You can come in and ask what's the best software for this, is really fantastic as well. And this is free. The Patreon group is a smaller area, and we have voice sessions and things like that. You haven't tried mint ice cream? Oh my gosh, Neil. I wish I could fly you over here because, oh my gosh. Okay, I love Chubby Hubby, but mint chocolate chip ice cream. Yes, absolutely. Vanilla, mint chocolate chip. Oh, I love pistachio too, because my dad used to eat it a lot, and so I just have a thing about pistachio. So Brittany says, I'm asking the question about access to the Discord because I've come across at least 2 different YouTube channels that make people pay access to their Patreon to have access to their Discord group. Yeah, so we don't have that. So basically what you would do, you join the Discord for free, just so you get into the server. And so typically what I suggest to people, if you're feeling a little bit unsure, just join the Discord and don't join the Patreon right away. Go to the public Discord, hang out for a little bit, see how you feel about how the server runs. And if you feel like, okay, this is a community that is supportive and I feel like I would like more, then you could join the Patreon group. Because the biggest difference, honestly, between the Patreon group and the public channels is that the public channels, you're not going to get remotely as much staff interaction. And I mean, me, Deepti, and Jordan, we're all in there, but most of the stuff is us critiquing in the Patreon group during voice sessions. I mean, we're in the other channels too. It's just we don't do comprehensive critiques and support in the public channels because I would have no time to eat. So anyway. Green tea, says Lynn. Dulce de leche. Ooh, cookie ice cream. Yes, I love this, you guys. All right, everybody, join our Discord. If you're not in there already, it's where all the cool kids hang out because I was not cool. And so I made my own space. But if you're cool, you can also hang out. You know, just saying, you know, uncool people, you can hang out here. We don't have Discord chats after Friday night hangouts. Thank you so much to our incredible lawyer top Patreon supporters. You know, so many people on this list have been with us for years at this point. And I just can't believe the dedication that they have to our community. So thank you all for your support. Visit artprof.org. There's lots of content on there that's not on YouTube. Type whatever it is you're looking for into the search bar. Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. And Gumby would like you to subscribe for more tutorials, critiques, and business tips. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.